Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this special webinar presented by CAGP. My name is Erin Kuhns. I am the Manager, Training and Education at CAGP. Today, I'm proud to introduce our speaker, Paul Nazareth, Vice President of Community Engagement at Canada Helps. Paul's team works directly with thousands of Canadians as they support their most beloved causes. Paul has been a philanthropic advisor with Scotiabank and has spent over a decade in planned giving and major gift roles with charities large and small. He is also one of our phenomenal faculty here at CAGP and a valued volunteer. For those of you who are new to the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, CAGP is a national association that inspires and educates the people involved in strategic charitable giving. We are the only Canadian professional association that brings together charitable fundraisers and professional advisors. We advocate for beneficial tax and legislative environment that strengthens philanthropic giving, creates a networking environment with like-minded professionals and experts, and provides access to outstanding learning opportunities and professional development. So, during this webinar, I invite you to submit questions anytime throughout the presentation using the question log that you should be able to see at the side of your screen. Paul will answer your questions during a Q&A at the end of the webinar. This webinar is worth 1 CFRE credit, and as with all of our webinars, today's presentation will be recorded, and you will be receiving an email with a link to the recording. Thank you so much for being here today, Paul. I will let you take it from here.
Wonderful, great stuff. Thanks, Erin. And thanks everybody for making the time to be here. It's very exciting to have this conversation with you today from a very specific perspective. Very often we talk about planned giving, big P out there, a lot of theory, whereas this is planned giving for organizations who really want to get it done and get back to work on the things they do in the organization in smaller shops who have often less resources and less ways to generate leads and different ways of engaging planned giving. So as Erin has shared as well, please jump in with questions and have them. I'll make sure to address them before we finish today. But a bit of background too and where this comes from. In my roles before with a number of charities and now with this national role with Canada Helps, I'm crossing the country almost a dozen times a year and working with charities right across the country. And as I spend time with them and go right into their shops and see how they're solving problems with their fundraising programs, I'm learning a lot about what really practical helps teams. So a lot of what's packed into this presentation is from actual small charities, and frankly, they hack their way to figuring out how to run their programs across Canada, coast to coast. So it's a very pan-Canadian conversation in this space. I've distilled the things that you can do down to these 5 things. Want to make it practical today, want to have 2 or 3 things you can take from this and put into practice right away to make sure, not just soon, but between now and the end of the year, you're closing some gifts and you have a program that can work for you going forward. So these are the 5 things I'm going to be covering here today from the specific perspectives of what can you do as a small organization with little resources, little capacity, and often no new budget. So let's jump in. If there's one thing that you can do, and this is not just planned giving, it is all of what we are often calling in CAGP strategic gifts, major planned leadership, everything above annual and events. It's engaging donors. I call this slide, "We are here to serve you." When I was in a bank and working with private clients around philanthropy, and it was so fascinating because I was essentially a neutral fundraiser hiding in a bank. And the donors would come to us and say, we've got these giving plans. And sometimes they were to organizations, and myself and my team leader were both fundraisers from charities. And we would say, well, this is an organization very active in your community. We know the fundraisers at this institution. You could talk to them about this gift. And so many times the donors would say to us, I can't find my way to a person. You know what, your organization, you're biased because you can't see through the wallpaper of your organization. But think of the charities that you love. Go today, go tonight, go after this webinar and try to find the person in charge of planned giving, the person who would help you to close a bequest, to talk about maybe donating securities, to have a conversation about why you give. And what you'll find most of the time is info at emails, is phone numbers that go nowhere, is titles that don't make any sense because we're merging everything. Everybody's doing everything in smaller organizations. And so it's very hard for a donor to find out who to talk to. And make no mistake, this gift often called the ultimate gift is a gift often of conversation. And there's often two speeds it moves at. Light speed, where the donor's made a decision and it's just trying to get the legal information to put you in a will or put you into a philanthropic asset beneficiary status, or they need to have a conversation. There's almost nothing in between fast and slow. And for fast, they need to get that information, and we'll talk about the whole digital space. And for slow, they need to talk to a person. And this is the one thing. I literally have a book of 100+ pages called Secrets from the Other Side on why they can't reach people. And one of the big roadblocks is that we as charities have not kept up with how people communicate. And today in 2017, how that's done is our good friend, the internet and digital technology. What you're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is the world's first USB key. If you have a floppy disk on a computer in your office, you are in trouble and I can't help you. This is a key part for us as charities. We've got to start looking at this technology, starting to figure out and try to understand not just the technology of fundraising, but the technology of communication. You know, I was just talking to a technologist on our team who comes from a multi-billion-dollar e-commerce yesterday, and they were sharing with me the use of chatbots to serve clients, and actually now charities that serve program delivery to donors are starting to use these more artificial intelligence chatbots. And yet, how do we figure out how to communicate with donors who have questions? We can be using, what do we use on our sites? Again, I teach a course with a college on planned giving. I have several, now 100 students, and I ask them to share with me all the ways they see charities serving donors in this space. And it's always nothing more than email or voicemail. Think about the people that you contact on a regular basis in your business life, in your family life. I often say in a lot of my talks, and it's only mildly a joke, that I really don't like my brother-in-law. He's a very annoying human being. He's a Leafs fan. And he can reach me 24 hours a day by talk, text, direct message, FaceTime. Why can't your best donor contact you this way? We've got to start thinking of technology in the fluid ways that people do. Technology in 2017 is the way that people live. It's got to also be the way that people give. Now, that being said, what about our good friend, all of the fads? This is the thing that we also, as organizations, have to stop chasing. I'm sure every fundraiser on this call has been asked by someone in their organization, board, or a boss, how do we ice bucket? How do we get mustaches to work for us? And this is the challenge with a lot of these trends. They think that it's about technology. They think that it's about public access. People think that crowdfunding will work for them when they may be in a very small community in a donor base that is very highly specialized, tied to a cause of health, society, culture, arts, whatever. The donors are being confused by all of these different things touching our sector. Crowdfunding and social purpose investments and all of these different things. And the fads of things like text to give, oh my gosh, people think that this is some sort of a panacea, when in fact it really only works for gigantic crowds and disaster relief and things like that. We really have to say, what do our donors want to do? How do they do it now? How are they going to do it in the future? And especially for planned giving, how will that affect the way they transact? I work for a digital charity. Canada Helps is online. That's what we do. And we're the first ones to say that social media is not going to solve all your problems. You've got to figure out, again, how do you interact with your donor base? What is the purpose of the way that we do it? And in fact, one of the challenges is people don't integrate all of their social media into what they do. Donors give to you because they understand why you exist, and in planned giving, why you will exist tomorrow and 50 years from now. If they're making a gift that's tied to perpetuity, well, how would you exist 100 years from now? Your social needs to include that. You know, in a lot of ways, social is as important for listening as it is talking. Are you listening to your donors in this space? Are you listening as they talk about the different types of planned gifts? Are you sharing with them? Everybody's tweeting their special events. Everybody's tweeting their give to us this week because it's National Social Whatever Day. And yet they don't have one tweet a year that says, if you care about us and would like to leave us in your will, here is the link to our bequest wording. Talk to your local estate advisor. So this is one of the things about some of these different spaces. that we have to think about: being found and making sure that the information of plan giving is in the regular, everyday language of our charity. Quiet, consistent. Lead generation, it's in all of our mailings and things like that. It's those check boxes. Yes, I want to, if I have more information, I'm leaving the information, the charity in my will. And this is about covering the basics. So this is the whole concept. The next point here on the basics, too, is listening to our good friends at the Revenue Agency. You know, we have never been in more of a golden age with the Revenue Agency than now. And the actual information they're putting out there is starting to evolve. They used to put out 50-page text information bulletins. And now, this last year, just at the end of the year, they put out an infographic about how Canada donates, how much money is coming in. However, one of the things that we have to pay attention to is exactly physically how it comes in. Top fundraising method in 2016 in Canada, still church collection plates. As much as we think about the evolution of fundraising, we have to recognize that donors and a lot of organizations are still doing it the same old way. If you want to look at some ways that things are evolving, I'm going to give you some links to a report, one from AFP on the state of how charities use their websites, which is surprisingly important to plan giving, and what Canadian donors want. Very important report coming out of AFP every year. But the story and the tactics shift in plan giving because the ask is fundamentally different. When we fundraise, we are asking often for our campaigns, the charity's needs, the cause, and the things that we need to. Yet when people are giving to you through this ultimate gift, through the exercise of, frankly, leaving this earth and leaving everything behind, they ask themselves a very critical question: what matters to me, and what did I stand for? And the reason they put you in their will, the reason they include you in that plan, is answering this question: where does your charity fit in my life story? And if you don't know that about your donors, you need to know. And if you can't show them where you fit in a critical way, because in fact, sometimes donors really think of charities in a peripheral way in the way they interact and when they have a values discussion. And again, for me, it was fascinating moving from a small charity to Canada's largest university into a faith-based institution where I was representing 2 million people in this faith-based community, and then into a very neutral, secular bank. And in the bank is a place where I had an unbelievable amount of values discussions, because when you're neutral and you have nowhere to start, you start at the beginning. What do you stand for? And when we had those discussions and those donors went deep, they discovered they had deep connections to certain charities. And when we looked at their annual tax numbers and saw how much they were giving every year, the deep connections to charities weren't always in those annual gifts. So this is a place that where you as a small charity can actually really win, where you can outmaneuver the big charities in your town, in your province, and in Canada, because local wins in a personal life. So really interesting research that's out there is the research by Dr. Russell James. Now has gone all over the world. I'm going to give you a link to this. He did something incredibly beautiful by sticking donors in an MRI machine and reading plan giving brochures to them. I asked my wife to do this on our anniversary, and she said, please go away. This is the whole concept of thinking about why people give. And he showed us by what activated in the brain when he read this brochure and said the word legacy and said the word estate, bequest, will. The bequest and legacy gift was tied to the part of the brain that told the life story, biography, right? We used to call wills a will and testament. When I work with faith-based institutions, we talk about wills as a moral biography of your life. And so this is the piece that Dr. Russell James pulls out. And the language as a small organization, you want to make sure that you teach your team to be aligned to. The language of legacy is the language of biography. Where do we fit? Now, you're talking to different types of donors. Everybody wants to be talking about diversity. But the big diversity that matters right now in Canada is the diversity of age and stage. There are more older Canadians right now than there are younger Canadians as this progresses, with the boomers moving into the dominant position of retirement and of millennials who are now in their mid-30s, soon to push their 40s, as the dominant income earning position. This is going to change the way that fundraising is done. This is going to make plan giving no longer a nice to have. It will make plan giving a must have, because the generation with the most amount of assets will now have the least amount of income. We are going to have to get better at plan giving, all of us, especially small shops. And how do we talk to these generations? Now, when I'm talking here, I'm not talking about civics or the silent generation. They are 70 and 80 plus. We have about 5 more years left with them before they reach the ages of undue influence. I'm talking about what's next. How to be talking to baby boomers who are 60 to 80, and how to talk to these millennials who are about 25 to 35 right now. Again, soon will be upwards of 40. So when you're talking to the generation that's making a will, the largest generation that makes wills is really between 60 and 80. And then after 80, you want to be there in that will, but often decisions are made in that space. The language to them is the language of thank you. There are 2 reasons why people will often make a planned gift, and this comes from the research of the amazing Dr. Richard Radcliffe in the United Kingdom, who is a global leader on planned giving, who talks about please and thank you. Young people looking forward say, here are the problems I want solved in the world. Please do this through your work. And older Canadians who have had a lifetime of connection to you, who have key moments connected to you, are saying thank you for the things that you have done. I want to give this to you in celebration of that thanks, and in the belief that you will represent my values when I'm gone. The physical method of talking to these people is about assets. Boomers will soon hold most of their income in assets, of their capital in assets, not income. And so as organizations, we are going to have to be better at receiving assets. Right now, people are still writing you checks. And in some cases, they're even asking, how do I wire money? After this current generation of civics moves on, you're not going to see as much of this. They're going to be saying, how do I give to you in terms of things like transferring securities, wiring you money, all of the digital ways to do that. And yes, they will be thinking about gifts of life insurance, of bequests, etc. So this is where we have to get very good at the language of transferring assets, the how. And unfortunately, boomers have been trained their whole life to think about cash and check, to think about annual gifts, maybe leadership. There's a generation, especially with small charities, who don't think of themselves as philanthropists or leaders or people who can give in that capacity. So this is where you got to work on them to help them understand, hey, you own your own home. You're worth more than you ever have been before. I know you've never given a gift of over $1,000 at once. Think of us as a part of the family. If you have 5 kids, we're the 6th. And it's that asset allocation as opposed to always how much, how much, how much. Nobody who is 75 years old, who has never written a check for more than $500 is ever going to get their head around giving you $150,000. And when they have that asset conversation, when they consult their advisors who give them confidence, that's what really moves them into a stronger position. But now what about the millennials coming up? Highest income earners in the generation, they're going to be the ones who are giving, but they have not even been taught the basics of fundraising and philanthropy. They don't know why. Why your charity? Why solve this problem? Unless they've moved into the age and stage of family building, they don't get the point of most of all small charities. A lot of our charities are tied to the concept of having a child with an affliction, of a person going into this stage of life, of moving into the concept from being dependent to a fully functioning citizen, active in civic life and the arts and politics and whatever. They haven't been taught this. And I'll tell you what they sure as heck haven't been taught with. They sure as heck haven't been taught by getting paychecks. What the heck is a charitable tax credit? The government of Canada does not teach you until you do your taxes what is a tax credit. Why do you even need a tax receipt? The only time they've ever thought of tax receipts is because their parents wanted them. And so this is where we've got to get better at educating the new up-and-coming younger donor, who is our income donor, who are going to be investing with us, not just in those crowdfunding type one-time gifts. And make no mistake, that's why crowdfunding is surging, because it's so good at telling the story in a digital medium and transacting quickly. And because nobody knows what a tax credit is, they don't say that they need a tax receipt. So GoFundMe and all those platforms don't give them one. This is a key piece that we're going to have to understand as we work with donors. I'm going to give you a link to the 2017 Global NGO Online Report. We're proud as Canada Helps to have been giving them Canadian data to understand how charities work in this space. This matters to planned giving because in a world of asset transfer, and I haven't talked about our friend blockchain and cryptocurrency, that is all going to become a part of asset transfer. Make no mistake that the sick kids and UBCs, U Calgarys, and Banff centers of the world are thinking about this. Is your charity. The future is here. If you're not thinking about this, if you're not connecting to the technologists in your local community, if you're not talking to the people who are working to transfer assets, the people who are talking about this fluid concept of doing good, not necessarily philanthropy, we're going to get in trouble. This matters to planned giving because this is how the donors interact with our websites to transact the gifts, to get the bequest wording. People need to understand that even though 2013 was the year that mobile outpaced desktop as the way that Canadians access the internet, and this comes to us, this data from Microsoft, we actually have to pay attention to the fact that the only reason why desktop even exists is because we use them in our workday and in our work. Today, primarily, when a donor is on their personal time accessing charity websites in the morning, not in the daytime, and in the evening, and unfortunately in the bathroom, they're using mobile. This matters in asset transfer because we force them to analog every chance we get. How does pretty much 95% of charities in this country who have securities programs set up do? If they do, they're dealing with human brokers having to fax machine things out there. This is one of the reasons why we as Canada Helps, now representing over 18,000 charities transferring securities, and we do this for so many of Canada's small charities. Why did we have a 300% increase? Because we have a digital platform to transfer securities for the broker, for the donor. You can do this too. You can work with your donors. If you have a program right now and you have a broker and you're faxing forms, the fact is you can be doing this in a digital way. What is a fax? A fax is a machine that takes an image and transmits it. Do you know an image transmitter that you're holding probably right now, i.e. a phone? This is the concept of digitizing asset transfer. This is one example in planned giving on how we can digitize the securities process. And why does it matter? It matters because this process happens between September and December, and it's a lot happening at the end of the year. If you're not getting it right now, this is a place where CAGP can help. We've got material and resources, articles and things you can cut and paste into your newsletters and your sites, etc. This is what we're trying to talk about. If you have a donor who's giving to you over $1,000 right now, they could be giving more to you by changing how they give and not how much they give. If you don't know, the donation of securities has a massive tax incentive for Canadians because if you had a stock worth $100 10 years ago, it's worth $1,000 today. You sell it today and donate the proceeds to a charity, you have to pay tax on the difference. Tax on the gain called capital gains tax. But if you donate that security whole, in kind, it stays without the capital gains tax. It's eliminated. So the donor is getting the $1,000 tax receipt and eliminating the capital gains tax. They are giving more by not giving more. They're keeping more of the tax money. They're giving it all to you. There's actually a lot of donors who are cashing out stocks and giving it to you. You're getting less because of it. If you don't have a securities program as a small organization, it's time to get one. For those of you who are on the call, and we were looking into some of the folks I know who are participating, and you know, it's funny how many of us think of ourselves as small, but you've got a fundraising team. And one of the challenges in the world of moves management, it has incredibly increased as the lead generation, the number of ways that things come in have changed and increased, as opposed to where it used to be just direct mail, just your different programs and special events. Now there's so much more for us to be keeping an eye on. I'm going to talk about how to activate all different players in this space, but it's fascinating when I talk about activating advisors. So many people want to talk to lawyers and tell them what we do, And when we asked the advisors at CAGP, we did a huge survey across the country as part of our conference one time and said, what do you want from charities? If your clients are giving to them, what do you need? And they came back and said, all I need is a one-page PDF that you can make in half an hour, legal title, charitable registration number, what we do, how to transfer us assets, and preferably, yes, a human being to talk to. This is the concept of serving advisors and, frankly, serving donors. When I was in the bank, I thought I would have way more time to talk to donors about legacy gifts, when often I had an average of 20 minutes to 2 hours, because the client said, I'm going to see my lawyer, I'm putting this in the plan, you got to give me something right now. And as a fundraiser, I would go to the charities looking for this information, and I virtually never found this one pager. I had to piece together this information on our own. Which brings us to our friend, the leaky bucket. Everybody wants to build new programs. So many people want to do more things. As a fundraiser in a charity, it used to blow my mind when people would say, okay, here's the new things we're doing this year. And of course, nobody ever talks about here's the things we're going to stop. And we are a profession addicted to acquisition. But what we really need to be paying attention to is, where are we losing donors in the stream right now? This is something that came to us from the computer company Oracle and our colleagues at Artez FrontStream, talking about the donor journey. If you ever follow the famous fundraiser Guy Malabone and his terrifying Twitter handle Ask Muscle, he is obsessed with the donor journey, and rightly so, because this is about the ecosystem of how you and your donor interact, from first contact to long-term engagement, to moving them up the giving stream from annual to leadership, maybe to monthly, into campaign, into capital major gift, into planned and ultimate giving. Do you understand how your donor moves through your system? Do you understand how you generate leads for planned and major giving? How you move donors up the chain from annual to leadership giving? Do you know how many monthly donors you have? Monthly donors being one of the single highest lead generators for planned gifts. An annual giver who gives to you every few years of maybe $1,000 versus someone who gives to you monthly of $25 for 20 years, who's made you part of their family, who's made you as much of a family as they do groceries, is much more likely to give you a planned gift, because you are part of the family, you're part of their body, because you're part of their income and the way that they transact. So this is a key piece to understand how you work with donors, in a lot of cases, how the money comes in, from what channel, how you engage them, how you receipt them is often a key point, and then how does it go out the door in terms of thanks and engagement. Really important thing, spending an hour in a boardroom with your finance staff and your fundraisers. Yes, finance and fundraisers, we need to get together more and not argue with each other over everything. This is a key piece to understand. But if there's a secret hidden in here, if you want to do one thing and people constantly focus on acquisition, on asking more, actually you need to look the other way. The most powerful ask is thank you. When we look at the Canada Revenue Agency, great reports on statistics and giving, Imagine Canada Mutart Foundation collaboration asking donors about what bothers them about philanthropy, CAGP's own engagement with even advisors and their clients, it all comes together to highlight one thing. Donors lose trust when we don't tell them what we did with the money. And in thanking them and saying, we appreciate you, here's what we did with the money, in a lot of cases is the strongest ask to go forward. As a smaller organization with less capacity, if you spend more time thinking than you do on new special events and new ways to get out there, you will engage donors more and you will get more strategic gifts, major and planned. Thank you is incredibly powerful. Stewardship is the secret weapon. I was working with a small colleague, a charity colleague of mine in the prairies, who was telling me about a donor that they were engaging, and they had never given more than $1,000 in their life. And in speaking with the donor about a project that had a 5-figure start and a 6-figure public campaign, the donor said, you know what, I really now understand how the organization works, what you're going to do in this project. You got to move forward with this. I can take care of the first part. You guys move out there. And the fundraiser was saying, look, you know, you've never given us more than $1,000 broken up in little checks over the years. This donor doesn't have that kind of capacity. We live in a tiny house on the edge of town. He took the bus to this appointment, and the donor kept saying, no, I'm going to take care of this. And the fundraiser assumed, in this case, the ED of this small charity, no, they'll get their friends together and put some money together, and often this doesn't raise more than 10 or 15,000. We need close to 80. Until the donor said, look, let me make this real clear. And they took out their checkbook and they wrote that check for 80,000. This is a donor who had given that much in a lifetime of connection with the charity, time on the board of that charity. But it's because in the conversation of saying thanks, they brought the ultimate weapon to understand and educate a donor, clarity. They had walked through everything. They helped them understand how the organization works, what were the needs, what was the future possibility, what did the future look like. A lot of donors are financially able to make planned gifts, but they are not emotionally able because they don't have two things, an understanding of who you will be in the future and the confidence in their own financial stability to make that sacrifice. We'll talk about advisors because advisors are the ones who give them that confidence. We also have to understand, too, that we are dealing in Canada with a change in the ways that Canadians are connected to charities. Less of a loyalty to an organization because their parents gave to it, because it's a foundational institution in their city, but more towards what problem are you solving? As we lose the civics, the most trusting, generous generation in the history of Canada, and we're moving to the boomers, who are an entrepreneurial generation who started their own businesses, who are the ones who say, how do I solve a problem? I'll do that work. Well, how do you solve a problem? It's why I'll give you money. But they won't give you money because there's a logo that they've known for their lifetime. This is a conversation that we need to start having if we have conversations around these kind of gifts. That conversation leads me to this concept. As a small organization, maybe you don't even have full-time fundraising staff or full-time gift planning staff. How do you activate everyone? This is the whole move of what you're hearing a lot in CGP and AFP about the culture of philanthropy. We've got days coming out the yin-yang. We've got all sorts of days. We've got Leave a Legacy Month. Right now, in several provinces, their bar associations have Make a Will months. We're coming up in the middle of this month on AFP's National Philanthropy Day, where we celebrate philanthropy all across Canada. A couple weeks after that, November 28th, is Giving Tuesday, tied very much originally to Black Friday, but now 5 years on, is global and is raising the volume on philanthropy and doing good on that day. We're neck deep in our community campaigns tied to United Ways. Last week was Community Foundation's Random Act of Kindness Day. We've got a ton of these things. We don't need to be making more. If you maximize these days for how you do this and integrate the planned giving message in these days in there. Last year, I engaged a whole bunch of charities and watched how they engaged their planned giving donors on Giving Tuesday, called them in for a legacy event to say, thank you for thinking of us in this way. Thank you for building your community in this way, where they had call campaigns to thank donors on National Philanthropy Day. When they're in the blackout period of United Way campaigns, when they're engaging donors in that campaign conversation about impact and using all those external advisor days around Make a Will and insurance, etc. Make sure you put these days on your calendar and you integrate not just the awareness of your charity, but yes, to your donors, the concept of planned gifts into that day can be a free marketing pin on how to do that. When I was working with private clients in the bank and we were talking about the concepts of philanthropy, it was a very interesting neutral conversation. I would be asking the donor, what do you think about charity? What are the gifts that you make? I'm looking at your taxes here. I see all these different tax receipts. You give to X, Y, and Z. Where do they live in your mind in philanthropy? And what I heard back from them was actually a very interesting multi-generational donor bias towards type of charity. Now, I don't know all of who's on this call, what kind of charity you're sitting in. Are you civic? Are you animal? Are you environmental? Are you human rights? Are you religious? Are you arts and culture? You know, this is an amazing thing that we have maybe unconsciously taught donors, and they have learned that when it comes to education and health, we give long-term, we give endowments. And when it comes to social and cultural, We think about flexible. We think about hyper-dynamic. But these people don't need buildings. They need money. And when it comes to small and tiny organizations, often tied to environmental and animal charities and rescue and things like that, well, they're just small-time operations. They don't think long-term. To any of you who fall into those categories, was that a generalist statement? Was that a true statement about your strategy? As a fundraiser, I would say, darn right it's not. But this is what we've taught donors. Generation to generation. This is how many of our campaigns play out. Look at the campaigns of healthcare and education, that they're endowment focused, chair focused. They're billions of dollars now. And community campaigns often do focus on impact, but we have to remind those donors that, heck yes, we need a roof over our head. In fact, most social service organizations serving the public, serving our citizens in need infrastructure to have long-term impact. When I look at some of the work done by John Howard Societies, Elizabeth Fry Societies, the YM and YWCAs of Canada, and all of those community impact organizations tied to social housing and addiction and research and helping people to alleviate poverty, darn right they need long-term funds. They could be using the endowment piece. They could be using the concept of long-term giving. And of course, for smaller organizations, oh my goodness, this whole bias towards today only is insane. And it is a challenge that tiny organizations do go out of business every 10 years or so. It's true. But can you create a long-term fund? Can you create a long-term vision for organizations with planned gifts? Yes, you can. The answer is increasingly more of the financial firms have launched donor advised funds. I worked for one of these banks in a donor advised fund. We engage donors to create $100 million worth of giving plans a year. And because we were fundraisers in my team and knew those charities, we were happy to make sure that the gifts were going to the right organization, but not all of the people in these institutions understand how charity works. We've got some now that are serving different charity financial institution houses, but as they grow, there will be even more philanthropic ignorance in the space, and you need to make sure as a charity that you're touching base with all of these organizations. And let me be super clear. Every logo you see on this page is a charity. Let me say that again. Every single logo you see on this page is a charity. That TD has the Private Giving Foundation, RBC has Gift Funds Canada, Scotia has Aqueduct Foundation, Canada Gives and benefaction work with CIBC, Dynamic Funds, Raymond James, all of them, and they are out there representing us. So if you haven't made sure that your local reps know who you are as a charity, and that donors, as they turn to these advised funds, know and understand your long-term vision, that's going to be important. But I can tell you, there is a movement afoot, a movement since Confederation of Canada that is at its strongest point right now, and that's Community Foundations of Canada. They're the ones who are going to be the planned giving default for your city. When a donor is not sure if your charity is going to exist in 60 years, and the accountant says to them, you have no kids and $2 million, you own your own home, you've got these assets and investments, when I liquidated it all, even an average everyday Canadian gets into that seven-figure mark. You care about this charity, a local regional branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association, or Alzheimer's or arthritis, or Big Brothers or Big Sisters. And they are not sure if you're going to exist 60 years from now, I can tell you. Instead of first turning to the financial firms, you're going to see more of them turning to community foundations. So it's time to make sure that you have a rock-solid relationship with the head of your local community foundation so that they can understand, for donors' sake, what you do, what you represent, what's your long-term vision, what's your short-term vision for capital current funding and long-term endowment funding. This is the future when it comes to partnership in giving. But we've also got another future that's pretty darn unstable. I don't know how many who are listening to this call read that Charity Village article last year citing that there were hundreds, there are now hundreds more, of these groups in every city of this country. And they're wonderful. I'm not throwing them hate here. They're great organizations, these 100 women who care, 100 guys who care, 100 kids. They're doing wonderful things and bringing together groups once a month, once a quarter, having charities talk off the stage about what they do, raising that awareness. and everybody in the room who's brought a blank check for $100 decides on the winner and writes a charity's name on it and gives that charity often $2, $5, $10 grand a night. But also, just like crowdfunding, this generosity has a little bit of a dark side. And that quite a number of these organizations will say, you take the money, but we don't want our 15 pitches a year to get our donors on 15 more lists. So please make sure you don't put these names in your database. Receipt, but don't put them in your database. And for those of us who care about acquisition and engagement, this is a challenge. If you're talking to these donors about the long-term vision of your organization, it's going to be a challenge. When it comes to donors getting that information, where did they go? I wish more of them would go to the Revenue Agency Canada search site and that Google would pull out of it up. It doesn't. This is the search site, and what do they say about you? They put out there your revenue agency pie charts. This is the challenge too. Have you put that information out there? Is it on your website? Make a bequest to our charity, downloadable one-pager, charitable registration number, legal title, bequest wording. If you do one thing after this for planned gifts, set that up. As the great man in infotainment, Ron Popeil, used to say, set it and forget it. We think about the buzzwords of the next decade. Impact is very well staked as the biggest one right now. You know, when we talk about how we do what we do as charities, that's the challenge. We often fall into talking about who we are by what we do. I visit in my role with Canada Helps hundreds of charities a year in every province. And the second I'm in the door, we're always doing a tour. Learn about who we are by what we do, which is wonderful, which is heartfelt, but every donor can't be doing a tour every month. Every advisor who serves clients can't be coming in to do a tour because for them, time is money. And so we've got to get a lot better at talking about not just our output, but our outcomes and eventually our impact. An annual report is not enough. Who's reading all of this? Sure, the people who are head-minded are reading your financials and your annual report. There's a lot more donors that are heart-minded. They need to hear the stories of what they do. You have to tie your numbers and your needs to impact. This is where we have to be evolving, not just our annual report, but those stories and putting them out there in that place, especially if we're going to convince the donor that we're going to be here for a long time, that we need them for a long time. Yes, after they're gone. It's a key piece. This is the point place where we hope to help as Canada Helps in actually launching an impact page for every charity in this country, pulling in the Canada Revenue Agency data so that donors who are browsing and using Google can find you and make those planned gifts. You can't be Sick Kids. If you have not seen their campaigns, yesterday I literally tweeted out that Sick Kids bought a full-page ad in almost every major national paper, literally made a website, planforsickkids.com, a website just for planned giving. We can't do all of this. We can't get pro bono from these gigantic ad agencies. But make no mistake, too, you can outmaneuver every large organization, national and local, by outplaying the head and touching the heart, by telling and talking to your donors about the power and the service you have in your local community. If you want better examples, then again, all of those award-winning marketing agencies, and I got to tell you, they are more fancy than functional. You got to go to SOFI, the International Museum of Fundraising. I'll give you a link to that. And that's where you'll see a lot better local, small shop legacy campaigns. You know, a guy named Doug Puffer, who's on the board of CAGP, has pioneered and talks about donor surveying for planned gifts. Would you lead a planned gift? Do you know what securities are? Why do you give to our organization? Write it on this piece of paper and send it in. That's the kind of stuff that's really making a difference out there. When it comes to smaller shops, engaging in this way is important. And as I finish up, this is a big piece. How do you get all these advisors in your community, of which there are millions across this country, educated on your organization? CAGP is an organization that, as Aaron said, is the only institution that brings all these advisors together and gift planners, right? Estate planners, tax planners, financial planners, gift planners, all under one roof. And when we talk to them about what they need, about how they serve donors, this is the challenge. There is a split in fundraising and planning, in that we as charities are often campaigning when it's the wrong time for the donor in terms of age and stage. And that when a donor is deciding on everything they have on earth, they need a neutral, non-pressure conversation. And the challenge is as charities, our messaging is constantly to the now. This is a message that always hits home for me. And it was so beautiful a couple years back when we had Canada's admin-in-chief, Terry O'Reilly, host of the CBC show, The Age of Persuasion and Now Under the Influence, talk to us, keynoted to us about influence in plan giving, about talking to donors about legacy, right? If you Google legacy right now in Canada, the number one thing you're going to come up with is a Subaru. We lowball these donors in our language, right? I said, Terry, what do you hate about charity marketing? He goes, oh, Paul, it's that voice. Like, what voice are you talking about? For the price of a coffee a day, you can save a life. If you want to Google something, Google the Saturday Night Live skit talking about a coffee a day. And it was awesome because it's a really funny skit about what the people were trying to help think about that. For us, if I care about a charity and you keep on lowballing me in your conversation, I sat down with a fundraiser at a charity I'm leaving a bequest to. And I made this dude pretty uncomfortable, to tell you the truth, because he was all, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're doing it. These are the numbers of the organization. And I was like, I love you. And he started to sweat. And he was like, I'm sorry, Mr. Nazareth. What? I would die for you. I'm literally going to die for this institution. He was like, there's supposed to be two of us in these meetings. Really? This is about life and death. This is about the legacy of a human being on earth. This is about meaning. This is about values. And we keep asking these people for $2 and $3. When these people care about you, when they care about these institutions, they want to act and they want to get it done. And it's about assets, not income. So who do they turn to for assets? They turn to their advisors. Look at all the logos on this screen. They've got their accountant, they've got their estate planning lawyer, they've got now more often their family planning group, they've got their financial advisors, they've got the law association, they've got all of the different banking institutions and all of the new friends who I haven't put on here in robo-advising, right? Canadian award-winning institution in Wealth Simple. They're turning to all these folks, and the only one talking to all these institutions is, in fact, CAGP. And to say, all of you factor into the philanthropic process. We have got philanthropic advisors now in Canada. In the States, there's a ton of them. In Canada, there's a few dozen who work in the bank in private philanthropic advisory. We know them. And they're leaders in our community, the Joanne Ryans, the Marky Rickers, the Malcolm Burrows. We've got all these people to talk to. And you as a small shop, who's got the time? In your community, there probably is 1,000 advisors. What do? The answer, CAGP has given it to you. Free resource, downloadable, put together by CAGP and several other philanthropic foundation groups. It has literally got everything you need in there to cut and paste into an email to talk to an insurance advisor about how to remind them that their clients are your donors. And to please, if someone says, I'm thinking about a charity, don't say give them $20. You're an insurance professional. We can't legally talk to a donor about life insurance. Please do that on your end. Because if you take a bequest out of a will and put it into a life insurance policy, it can quadruple in its impact. If you take it and put it into, if you make the charity a beneficiary of an RRSP or a WIF, that money will come to the charity instantly instead of the 1 or 2 years it will take as part of a bequest. Advisors amplify plan gifts, and they work for you for free. The only deal is you've got to help them to serve their clients effectively, efficiently. This is the document to do it. I'm going to give you some links to some great resources that are out there that advisors pay attention to educate themselves on plan gifts. When we read it, it helps us work with them better. And then if you haven't got it, if you're a member of CAGP, everybody gets this book for free. It is the Bible of plan giving in Canada, the greatest resource ever written. And it's free to all CAGP members. If you're not a CAGP member, I encourage you to become one because you get the book for free. And if not, it's $100. It's a 600-page downloadable PDF resource that's searchable so that when a donor says, do you do that, you can say absolutely and then Google it on the PDF. Because you can do everything every other charity can. You think about the charity you look up to as the charity we can't beat. You can legally do everything they can. And this book has the legality, the policy, the procedure, the board piece, the marketing piece to help you to do it. Everything you need is there. Integration is key. Don't launch another special event. Spend 3 hours a year in 3 one-hour meetings, spring, summer, fall, making sure that plan giving is integrated into your annual and your major gift programs, into your annual and your events programs and your direct mail, and then go back to work. We even know as CAGP that our members across the country don't spend all of their time in plan giving. Even full-time plan giving people don't spend all of their time in plan giving. Look, the fiscal year-end monster hunts us all. We've got to produce. Our organizations have to stay open, and I know in small shops that's even more dramatic. So what gets scheduled gets done. Make sure after this you say, let's just look at our programs. Let's make sure in our direct mail there's a will checkbox. Let's make sure in our Twitter and Facebook schedule there's once or twice a year of if. I didn't say please give, because it's not easy to ask someone for a planned gift. It's like saying, can you make me one of your kids? Can you adopt me? No. If we live in your life and you're thinking of giving us a bequest, here's the link. And everyone, and believe me, there is an everyone, you know you have loyal donors. You know that you are part of a donor's life. Those people will take that link, take it to the lawyer, and put that bequest in there. And you will start getting more of these as time goes on. Advisors often push back, and I get to, on behalf of CAGP, speak to all these groups, CPA, advocates, STEP across the country, and they push back to say, well, we can't be talking to our clients about charitable gifts all the time. We don't want you to. But when they come to you and ask, and believe me, they do, right? We talk about giving in this country, and it's $15 billion a year, but those final 5 days are where a ton of it, maybe 1/3 of it happens, closer to a quarter, happens in that last month of the year, and everybody tries to jam it. If you ask a donor right now for $10,000, good gracious, there'll be a lot of deliberations. And they'll meet with their advisor and their accountant, and they'll hum and haw over it. And yet most Canadians make a will 2 weeks before they go on vacation. And they decide their entire life in the context of, how do we get to Cuba? We are mismatched. This conversation is mismatched in clients and in charities, with donors and with organizations. So you need to be for them the moment that it becomes important. If you and your community are talking to high net worth donors, are talking to important Canadians about big gifts, and you haven't seen this book, it is one of the most groundbreaking books of the past 5 years. A Canadian book, finally, a Canadian book on philanthropy and speaking with public, civic, well-known donors about giving. And a lot of this in here is about legacy giving. It is a great conversational piece to learn more about plan giving in that space. I want to make sure we have time for questions, but thank you for your time today and joining us for this webinar.
Thank you so much, Paul. And you should be able to see it. Do you see it there?
Just picking it up. It's a little small. Okay, so
you want me to read it out for you?
Sure.
Okay. Should you have an estate lawyer review your sample will wording? Paul showed a one-pager during the presentation.
Should you have an estate lawyer review that?
Yeah.
You know what, the thing is that wording is going to go to a lawyer. So you don't have to worry as much about, is it legal wording? Are you giving advice? You want to have on that paper, please consult a proper estate advisor. But frankly, in the charitable sector, we gainfully employ the well-known method of case, copy, and steal everything. So feel free to turn to our brother Google and look at what other charities have as their bequest wording, because it's so standard. And again, if you have plan giving for Canadians, that has been reviewed by a lawyer, and you can just cut and paste that wording for you and put it in there. But the key thing is it's super basic. All they really need is your legal title, charitable registration number, and again, please consult a proper estate lawyer, and then you're fine, because donors are really taking that to a lawyer. They're not really writing their own wills using the material that you're giving them.
Thank you, Paul. Oh, we just got another question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me just open this up. We have a couple more. So, love your social media slide. Can you please remind us of the source leverage?
The source of the social media slide? It might be how to. So there's a couple in there. We have that technology report, the Charitable Technology NGO report. I'm giving you a link to a couple other ones in my presentation, which CAGP will share. Another one is from the accounting firm. If you can believe this, we have a resource from an accounting firm on social media, but actually Grant Thornton, they have a nonprofit specialty group, has a whole report on social media for charities, strategy and risk management. But then again, we turn back to Plan Giving Through Canadians, which has an entire chapter on marketing and has social media properly integrated in there, because we update this book every 18 months. So it literally has Facebook posts and tweets to make sure that people think about wills and cash securities.
Great. Do you want me to read out the other questions?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Paul, for this presentation. You made points about approaches to baby boomers and millennials. You didn't speak to the smaller and oft overlooked generation sandwiched between them, Gen X. Any tips?
Yes, and I'm so glad someone asked this, because as a firm card-carrying member of Generation X myself, let me share with you that we are statistically insignificant. And the sandwich generation, in fact, we're sandwiched in between the two. They're the ones who are very much self-serve. That's why digital is important. This generation, primarily when we look at a lot of the information around current fundraising and direct mail, they are really that self-serve generation. But frankly, in terms of plan gifts right now, they're the generation with the least amount of assets. They're the generation who are career and family building and are in age and stage transition and are not our focus. This is a really big thing about who you spend your time with and who do you market to. So marketing to millennials is important so that they can put these gifts in their will as they make their first will, right? First will, 40 to 60, second will, 60 to 80, last will, 80 to beyond. Which one do you want to be in? We really need to focus our time on baby boomers and civics and our marketing to everybody down. So baby boomers primarily, Generation X tiny, again, in Canada, statistically insignificant, and millennials are the next big group to be focused on, but it's market versus time spent.
Do we have time for 2 more questions?
Sounds good.
About 2 minutes left. What if you aren't a local cause, but an international one? Which advisors would you reach out to?
This is a really key piece if you're an international cause, because actually very interesting, as Canada Helps right now, I'm doing many interviews a day as we interact our crisis center tied to the Rohingya crisis internationally, tied to the UN, where the government of Canada announced a match. Donors freak out when the government announces a match. They don't understand how the match works. And of course, if you're an international charity, you know that the governments change the way their matches work. So it's really important, actually, in that case, to reach out to advisors to simply understand how you play into international work and help. And the advisors to reach out to, again, this is the key thing. There's so many of them, especially in smaller communities. So, in fact, you want to look at influential orbit. And this is actually tied to the networking guides of things like Facebook and LinkedIn. So choose the advisors that are closer to your organization, who may have a connection to your organization, who are aligned in that work of financial and estate planning, and work your way out. Everybody knows a banker or a financial planner. They really don't necessarily care about this in the context of their clients. All they care about is does their client ask them, and if they have a connection to you, who you are, what you do, how you do it, how to transfer money to you. International is actually more important when it comes to crisis situations, when it comes to people trying to understand how to affect and help the world. But it's equally as important in terms of the way an advisor understands local, international. But for you, it's for the smaller charities, it's a plus to communicate with advisors. For an international organization, it's almost a must.
Okay, we'll squeeze in one last question and then we'll tie it up. What are some more examples of social media messaging that Paul can suggest? And perhaps any specific times of year we should be including this in our messaging?
Fantastic question. Again, I'm so proud to be connected to CAGP and the team that creates Plan Giving for Canadians, because they have helped to create a responsible calendar, a marketing calendar in this book of what times of year should equal what types of messaging for what types of gift. They are all different. Again, Canadians make a will before they go on vacation, so that's why Leave a Legacy Month is often cited as May. It's super important as donors are thinking about year-end gifts and transfer. All the wealthy Canadians try to jam these securities gifts in the last week of the year. And so marketing it in September to November is key. And then, in November and beyond, helping people, this is the focus, to understand not why to give to you. Because after December 15th, nobody's really thinking about who should I give to. They are kicking down doors to get you the money. They have decided to give, but they can't transact. And so this is a key piece about marketing after December 15th. A lot of it is about the how. If you want to give to us, here's how to create a monthly gift, a one-time gift. If you're trying to give securities, tweet it, Facebook it. Here's our form. And if you're going to your lawyer because you're going to go see family and you're traveling, here's the link to bequests. It's less marketing at the end of the year and more explaining. And then as you start the year, you're explaining what these gifts are. This is the cycle of philanthropy in Canada, but again, the greatest resource is inside Plan Giving for Canadians.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think we'll end today's session here. You'll see that Paul's email address is on his PowerPoint, so if you do have questions later, he's extremely open to hearing from you. You will shortly be receiving a link in your email to an evaluation of today's webinar. So if you're able to take a moment to fill that out, we'd really appreciate it, as it gives us very valuable feedback. I'll also take this opportunity just to let you know that the early bird deadline is coming up for the next original Canadian gift planning course, which is taking place in beautiful Wakefield, Quebec, just outside of Ottawa, February 26th to March 2nd, 2018. So you can save $100 if you register by this Friday, November 10th. And please join us for our ongoing Webinar Wednesdays series, when Anil Gokhale with the Toronto Foundation will be presenting Donor Advised Funds, a Strategic Philanthropic Journey on Wednesday, November 29th. So you can find more information about these and other educational opportunities on our website. And Paul, thank you again so much for sharing this terrific webinar with us. It was such a pleasure to have you here today. Looking forward to it again. And I wish everybody a really great week.